Hi, welcome to Göteborg Film Festival and the 12th edition of TV Drama Vision. My name is Sia Edström and I'm the head of industry at the festival and in charge of the programming for Nordic Film Market and TV Drama Vision. We are experiencing an all-time high for TV drama since a few years, and especially for Scandinavia, and there seems to be no end to it. And this year's TV Drama Vision sold out even before we released the program, so that shows that it is a big interest. And when we started our round of interviews and research for this year's program, some words came into my mind that I heard a few years back, and that was, this is the golden era of drama. And we felt immediately that this is a good description where we are at this time of age right now. And there are so many people in the industry that we would like to thank for letting us make so many interviews with you, for sharing their contacts. And a special thank you to our advisory board for their expertise. We would also like to warmly thank our funders, Nordisk Film and TV Fund, Creative Europe Media, Region Västra Götaland, and Film i Väst. This event would not happen without you, you know that. And of course, we would also like to thank already in advance to all our partners, speakers and guests that will be on stage for these next 2 days. And as you know, I have a long time great partner in creating the content for TV drama. She will also be your host on stage for the coming 2 days. And please give a warm hand for the amazing Andrea Reuter.
Thank you, Sia. That's what I was standing on the side so I could make a grand entrance. So, hi everyone, and warmly welcome to TV Drama Vision 2018. These 2 days are really the yearly highlight of my professional calendar. It feels so great to be here and to see all old friends and coming friends in the audience. We have 2 packed days in front of us. It's almost 10 hours of program here on stage, and then of course all the mingling in between and the award ceremony tonight, and we have more than 50 guests that are going to be on stage. So it's going to be a lot of work for me, which I look forward to. And may I add that half of the guests are female and half male. So we're really happy about that. We did the head count. So just a little bit info. Here you see when the breaks are. In the first break, we're going to serve sandwiches outside so you can have something to eat. And the name of the Wi-Fi is SFBio Conference, and there you have the password and the username. And if you want to tweet or Instagram, please use the hashtag TV Drama Vision 2018. I think we don't need more info right now. Let's get this show rolling because our next guest needs to catch a flight. So it's a very big honor and a pleasure for me to introduce to you one of our day's absolutely top political satirists working in film and television and creating the shows Veep and The Thick of It. He has won a Primetime Emmy Award and multiple BAFTAs. And in 2010, he was nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay at the Oscars. And he was actually, that was for In the Loop, that he also directed. And he was actually here in Göteborg when he got the announcement. So I want to say welcome back, Armando Iannucci.
Hello, thank you very much. Thank you. Hello.
So welcome.
Thank you.
You're not only here as our first keynote speaker, you're also here at the film festival.
Yes, that's why I was here. Sorry, I have to. I've got my bags over there ready. A plane is. No, it's very nice of you to ask me to come along here as well. I'm here with The Death of Stalin, which is a comedy film about the death of Stalin, and which 2 days ago was banned in Russia for some reason. I don't know why, but. And it's based on a graphic novel, a French graphic novel, and it's based on sort of true events that happened around about Stalin's time when he died, horrific events as well. But you know, he instructed the guards never to disturb him, and so they were too scared to disturb him. So when he fell over with a stroke,
Nobody helped him.
Nobody helped, so he just lay there for a whole day. And then when the Politburo arrived, they were too scared to call a doctor because they didn't know which doctor to call, because Stalin had put some of the doctors on a kind of a wanted hit list because he was paranoid the doctors were out to kill him. So his kind of own fear and his own sort of reign of terror was what got him in the end. Really.
Yeah. And you had a couple of screenings and Q&As already.
That's right. The last 2 days I've been here with the Death of Stalin. And you're right. And the last time I was here was Within the Loop. So it's nice to be here.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
So, as you already mentioned yourself, Death of Stalin has been banned in Russia.
Yes.
And in some of these Stan countries, Kyrgyzstan, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, and Turkmenistan.
Belarus.
And Belarus,
yes.
So
I think it's for artistic reasons. He had a license. He was granted a license. It was all set to go in the cinema. And 2 days beforehand, the culture minister had a private screening with some friends and artists. And
they actually wrote a petition.
And they wrote a petition saying it had no artistic merit whatsoever. And that was the reason.
And it was like painting the Russian people in a bad light.
Well, yes, except one cinema did go ahead and showed it, and the audience in the theatre said, no, it doesn't. It's all perfectly true. And there was also a claim that it was because of the presidential election next month, that it was an attempt by the West to interfere in the election.
They should say about interfering.
Well, I know. I mean, I think Putin would be the first to say that to interfere in another country's election is a bad thing. And, we mustn't do that. So, and as far as I know, there was no CIA funding for the film. But I'll check. I'll check. Yeah.
So, of course, we're going to talk about the role of satire in today's world. And okay, so the film was banned in Russia.
Yes.
But it's not really such a good situation in the States either. I mean, reality kind of trumps
you've brought
fiction nowadays.
Yes, you brought the elephant into the room, haven't you? Yes.
I did not use the name. I used the verb.
Yes, Trump. Yes, I mean, I've said a long time. He is his own satirist. That's the problem. He is. Every tweet
he's delivering a lot of material.
He's an entertainer. He's obsessed with ratings, and he's done his State of the Union speech. He'll no doubt be tweeting about the ratings and the figures, and so he is his own comedian. He's a sort of self-basting satirist because he lives in this He just lives within the world that is contained within his head, and everything in his head is a great idea and is true. And as long as it's in his head, he thinks that's fine. And if we disagree and say, that didn't happen, this doesn't exist, that is wrong, as far as he's concerned, we are just either idiots or unpatriotic for disagreeing with him. There is an element of, I'm not comparing Trump to Stalin. No, don't, but he does use Stalinist language. And an American senator mentioned this in the Senate last week. Because Stalin used this phrase, enemies of the people. If you disagreed with him and the party, you were an enemy of the people. So what he did was he criminalized opposition and dissent. Trump used that phrase. He's used that phrase several times in tweets, saying that NBC and the Washington Post and CNN are the real enemies of the people, and not realizing that phrase is actually a loaded phrase. When Khrushchev took over from Stalin, he actually banned the phrase enemies of the people because it was so Stalinist. So a phrase that's all about restrictions on freedom of speech was itself banned from being spoken. And then Donald Trump has sort of taken it out of its cupboard and dusted it off and is using it again. And that's for me the worry. It's not that he's breaking the law and all that. It's the fact that he operates from a premise that because he was elected, he can do anything, which includes shutting down dissent. And that's a very unhealthy place for any democracy to be in. Really.
For sure. So what role can satire play in this world?
What role can satire play? No role whatsoever. In that, I do think that it's the route to insanity to think that just by telling jokes or by satirizing or whatever, you're going to change people's views and opinions, you're going to change people's voting beliefs. I don't think it's that. Peter Cook had this phrase about how wonderful the comedy was in the cabaret in Weimar, Germany in the 1930s, and how it did so much to prevent the rise of Hitler. It just doesn't work. The great rise of political stand-up in the UK was in the 1980s under Margaret Thatcher. And she then won 3 elections. It doesn't... And I do sometimes worry that it's actually a release. It's a sort of safety valve.
So instead of actually doing political actions,
yeah, exactly.
I think
the way to change people's minds is to go out and argue with them and campaign and to write and to make speeches and to knock on doors. To engage. I mean, that is the other thing that does worry me today, is that people don't engage with opposite points of view. We're so tempted by social media to stay within our own comfort zone, and anyone who disagrees with us we can block or unfollow or non-platform, and what it means is we reach the stage where if you disagree with me, I'm saying, well, the fact that you disagree with me means that you're wrong, and not only that, but I find it offensive and I would like you to leave now, please. It's that sense
instead of saying, well, okay, this is my opinion,
this is my opinion, blah, blah, blah. Because democracy is by definition the living together of different points of view in safety, and if we start, we become like Trump if we start saying, no, I don't want to hear it. No, I know what you're going to say. I don't like it. I don't agree with it. Please don't.
And of course, freedom of speech is about listening to those that you don't agree with. That's the point of freedom of speech.
Yes, which doesn't mean to say that you approve of what they say,
no.
Or that you will be won round to what they say, but you have to allow for different forms of opinion to operate simultaneously.
So I'm thinking like this. We have a room full of powerful people here, creators, decision makers, and the likelihood of them all starting to politically campaign and knock on doors, I'm hopeful, of course, but it might be that they're pretty busy working. Yep. So I'm thinking, what can we in this room? Because you just said that satire plays no role, but maybe through our work we can do something. What could that be?
No, I think what it does is, when it's good and when it works, is it helps clarify. It helps maybe crystallize thoughts and opinions that may be swirling around, but which you haven't quite articulated yourself. I think that's where it might help. It might give you a useful image.
It gives you like an arsenal, a toolbox of arguments.
Yeah. But also, I don't think of myself as a satirist. I'm not, because it makes me sound like that's my occupation. And when I wake up in the morning, I think, oh, who am I going to satirize today? I don't think that. I write writing comedy, and I'm primarily there to write stuff that I hope makes other people laugh, that I think is funny, as an entertainment. And it's not it doesn't belittle any topic by making a comedy out of it, but neither should we see entertainment as a lesser form than... I mean, drama is entertainment, really. It has other, effects. It can be moving. It can be, it can be political. It can be all sorts. But fundamentally, it's there to engage people creatively. And all I'm interested in is engaging. And sometimes, the stuff I write, like Veep in the thick of it, I kind of want to leave it open, as to leave it up to the audience to decide for themselves whether in the same position they would act the same way. It's about trying to show people how certain people arrive at certain actions and conclusions. So I'm very against saying these are the good guys and these are the bad guys and that's how it will be. I much prefer to portray people as just what we all are, which is human beings, which means, we all have our good points, we all have our bad points, we all have our flaws, but we also have our virtues, we all have our principles, but we also have moments where we've compromised, and the mess of being human is what I like to show, rather than saying, my God, this is awful. Why don't you go out and do something about, I sort of feel that's up to the viewer or the audience to decide for themselves, really. Yeah.
And I was thinking, I think Veep, everyone has seen Veep.
Okay.
So let's take that as an example. And
Okay.
of course, that's the context is very fast-paced and
Yes.
of course, not like the normal day for any human. But maybe you could talk about character development.
Yeah.
Because that's what you were kind of...
Yeah, when we write stuff, and these projects are always done in a very collaborative way. I mean, I had the idea of a vice president. When we wrote it, we didn't have any performer or actor in mind, but we made it...
but you decided it was going to be a woman?
We decided it was going to be a woman because, I sort of thought... I didn't want people to think, oh, is this about Joe Biden, or is this about Al Gore, or is this about Dick Cheney? If we make it... Because there hadn't been a female vice president, if we made it female vice president, then it was looking forward rather than looking back. And of course, then once you write it, you think, okay, now we have to have a tremendous comic actress to play this. And HBO suggested Julia Louis-Dreyfus, who I'd always been a fan of, from Seinfeld.
Of course.
Really. And we met, and we were scheduled to talk for 30 minutes over a cup of tea in some hotel in Los Angeles. And we went on for 3.5 hours because we were making each other laugh, but also we were already thinking of episode 2 and what could happen in episode 3. And what I didn't realize was that she grew up in Washington. Her parents are doctors, but they were based in Washington. So she knew that world. And also being, high profile herself, she knew what it was like for someone to go into a room and know that everyone knows that you've come into the room, which is what goes through the vice president's mind. But also, if you're feeling terrible, you still have to keep smiling because, that's just how it is. So she knew all that. And then she had this tremendous kind of heritage of 20 years or so of fantastic classic sitcom that she'd been in. And then... in terms of writing the characters, I tend to like to go out and research. So I went out to Washington and met senators. But basically, I always ask to see the number 2 or the number 3 because they're the ones that really know how everything works, and they're the ones who are a little bit more
that actually
discreet.
do the work.
Yeah, exactly. And they were great. And you gradually realise there's an Amy and there's a Dan and we met the Jonah. We met a guy from the White House, from the West Wing. And even his emails were full of how he worked in the West Wing. So, sorry I didn't get back to you. I'm in the West Wing. It's a crazy day. And they were written in like the emails themselves looked stressful. They were like there was no punctuation and exclamation marks and so. But it's the West Wing. What do you expect? Almost like, do you know who I am? It was like the subtext there. And we met for lunch, and he was this little boy. He had a beard and a very red face, and he was smoking as he arrived. And he said he could meet us for 45 minutes. And he sat down, and his lunch was beer. That's what he had. He had beer. And he kind of was sweating, and he's kind of loosened his tie, and he was kind of like that. And he was telling us all about the West Wing, and he was telling us that before I worked in the West Wing, I used to date sort of 6s and 7s, but now I'm in the West Wing, I date 8s and 9s, and but it's and it was like that. He worked in the digital online messaging. I mean, he basically worked on the Twitter feed, basically, in the West Wing. So he was not, he wasn't
That
in charge.
is one of the greatest positions nowadays.
Nowadays,
then,
that is where that influences elections. That's what's good. But, and then after about 45 minutes, he kind of got up and left. And as he left, I saw him light another cigarette. And,
you were like, I have no...
and I thought, right, okay, we've got to get him in. Now, he was small and had a beard. And we met so many actors who were small and had beards. And but the very first person we met was Tim Simons, who's very tall and thin and has no beard, and he was very funny. But I in my head I was thinking, yeah, but he's not small and has a beard. And then, of course, I went back and saw him. And I thought, no, what are we doing? It doesn't have to be double of the guy. And so Tim, and when you go into senators' offices now and Congress people's offices now, someone will come forward and they'll say, "Hi, I'm the Dan of the office." You know, they'll introduce themselves as that character, but no one will introduce themselves as the Jonah. But they'll always tell you about who is the Jonah. You know, it's always someone else. But what I thought was interesting was that we then went round the real West Wing, and actually it's full of Jonahs who like to just say they work in the West Wing, including 4-star generals and very senior policy people who have been offered an enormous suite of rooms in another building across the way. But want to say they work in the West Wing, so are quite happy to sit in a corner, in a corridor, on a chair, with a laptop, kind of crouched like a kind of praying mantis. Just these 50-year-old generals and so on. That's because they just want to say they work in the West Wing. And I was shown round the West Wing by Obama's sort of bagman, kind of personal aide, called Reggie Love, who's this tall ex-basketball college kind of star, and has a badge name saying Love on it. And but he was interesting because he kept referencing the TV show The West Wing. So he would say, "This is the Roosevelt room. This would be where CJ and Josh would." And I'm thinking, hang on, but you are him. This isn't a film set. You are him. Why can't you say this is where Angela Merkel would chat to Barack Obama? And they see it as they're excited by the idea of television. Actually doing something about their lives, as if their lives are so humdrum and boring that they need the glamour of television to give it some kind of validity. And so that was interesting, that notion of, and it's a sort of undercurrent in all the stuff really, which is, these government buildings on the outside look grand and imposing, and you think everyone inside knows exactly what they're doing, and then when you go in, you realise it's not like that at all. It's, as I said, it's just human beings, and they're kind of they're just trying to get through the day and not be found out, really, like all of us, I suppose.
So after that initial 3.5-hour meeting,
yes.
was Julia working with you, developing the character, or
yes,
did you take
developing
over
the character,
that?
but also sitting in on some of the other casting sessions as well. And then what I like to do is, when we get a script, is actually rehearse in advance, because I think the actual shoot itself is the most expensive part of the production, isn't it? That's when you've got everyone there, all the equipment, all the personnel.
You better be ready for it.
Time is pressing. Why then choose that moment to have a conversation about a line in the script for 2 hours? Or why then work out where the person should come in and where they should leave? And, and so, and I thought this was standard, but it's not. But why don't we just all meet in a little church hall somewhere 2 weeks in advance and rehearse it? And that's where we can play around. I encourage the cast to improvise just to see what else comes out, and it's the chance to see the scene and see what else is potentially funny about the scene, and start drawing that out. And we always have the writers there with us as well, so if something really good comes up, there's time to feed it into the script, because we've still got a couple of weeks to go.
And did you continue working like that?
Absolutely, yes. And we did that for the whole series. We, every year we meet for 2 weeks, sometimes in London, sometimes in LA, sometimes in New York, to rehearse, say, the first 4 or 5 episodes. We'd have a break in the shoot to then rehearse the next block of episodes. And it just saves so much time on set, because when you're on set, you can just do it. And everyone's already done it in their head. And I found also doing it for The Death of Stalin, I remember Steve Buscemi telling me that it was great, because it meant not only did he give him a chance to kind of get to know his story from beginning to end in chronological order, because of course you don't do that in the shoot, you're all out of order, but he said he got to know everyone else's story as well, so that when we come to do the scenes, he knew exactly where everyone was in their
their
story.
mindsets and,
you know, and he said that was absolutely invaluable, and they had a great time, and we came up with new material in the. And that's not to say that on set, you know, we're always trying stuff out. I try, in the thick of it especially, but also in Veep, I try to make the filming as fluid as possible. So we try not to put down too many marks or restrict the cast and where they can go, so that we can try and do the whole scene rather than just this line here or just the, you know, we can do those at the end as pickups and as repositions, but I love to just let them do the whole scene again and again. Then we break it down, and then once we've broken it down many times, we do the whole scene again at the end of the day, because everyone's got under the skin of it and have thought of new stuff to do, and that's how I like to do it, really.
So how about improvisation? Because
Yeah.
I think, I mean, you're known for fast-paced and really great dialogue.
Well, that's the writers. That's the team of writers.
Yeah. Okay, so
Yeah.
maybe tell us a little bit about that. What's the team?
Oh yes, I mean,
what
we
was the
talk about
writing process?
improvisation, but it's not like the whole episode is improvised. I mean,
No, of course not. I'm thinking, like, do they have to say exact those lines? That
there are moments, for example, Malcolm Tucker in the thick of it has these great big monologues that are very sweary but very baroque in their kind of descriptive language, and they have to be done as written, because Peter needs to learn them.
Yeah.
Because there's no way you could kind of improvise that kind of. And it's very funny because we were shooting in a disused set of offices with glass kind of meeting rooms, and you'd see Peter in a glass room swearing to himself for about an hour and a half, just walking around, because he's trying to. He says he's trying to make his mouth remember the movements of the speech, so that when he does it on camera, it just spills out. When we're writing Veep and think of it, a lot of work goes into the plot, a lot into the structure of the plot, and then a lot of work goes into burying that structure, so that no one, if a scene in which something major happens or a major piece of information arrives in a scene, I always like to have that information buried in something funny. So we don't think everything's stopped, so that we can just tell you the next important point. So a lot of work goes into the plot. And then I ask one of the writers, or maybe a team, 2 writers, to write that plot as a script, but very quickly. So not to worry too much about, you know, the phrases and the jokes and so on. It's really a way of just turning that plot into a document that we've got, you know, something physical we can hold in our hand, because then we can see, okay, it's a bit slow here, let's lose all that. This is good, can we have more of this? This seems promising. How about also if this happened and this happened? So we do a very, very fast first draft. And then it's the second draft where all the detail goes.
And how many people were in? You did the first 4 seasons as showrunner, right?
Yes.
And then you handed it over?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So how many people were in the writers'
There
room?
are, I'd say there'd be, in the end it grew to about a dozen. Yes,
Okay.
a dozen, maybe 2 working on each episode. And we do all these rewrites and rewrites, so it gets more detailed with each rewrite. But then what we do is we all swap. So we all look at each other's episodes and just add lines or add a phrase, or, you know, just improve something where maybe there's a line that's not quite hitting. And then we give the scripts back, and then they do another pass. So there's lots and lots of rewriting going on. And then we go into the rehearsal. And then we do a lot more work in the rehearsal, as described, just playing about with each scene. And sometimes, you know, something can come up in the rehearsal that is so much better than what we had, but the cast will say it's because of what they had that they were able to then take it a bit further. But once they've taken it a bit further, you then realise you don't need some of the early stuff that you wrote. You know, it's the scene has moved on. So we do that, and then we rewrite again, and then, you know, 3 days before each day's filming, I have a couple of writers on set, and I just give them the pages for 3 days' time, and just ask them to write alternative jokes and alternative lines for each of the lines, just to
So you have
see.
something to kind of pick from?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's how we do it. And then we lock it and give it to the cast, and they learn it, and off we go. You know.
So I know you can't talk a lot about it, but you have a new project with HBO.
Yes.
Maybe you can say something
I
about
can say something only
because Veep, of course, was an HBO show.
Yes, and I stopped doing Veep partly because I'd been doing Thick of It and then In the Loop and then Veep, and that's 10 years of doing sort of politics, and I kind of thought I've probably said enough, so I wanted to stop Veep. It's so fun, and it's not the sort of thing you say in America on American television, which I'd like to stop now, because you know, it's all predicated on getting to season 17 and so. And I remember Mike, the head of HBO, when I said I don't want to do any more, he made a noise. He didn't say. He just went. I said, but you know, you can carry on if you want. But also, I'd been flying backwards and forwards with my family. Are based just outside London. They were all at school. We didn't want to, so I'd been doing lots of work. Lots of commuting. We were fortunate. We were able, all our writers were in London, all our directors were in London, all our post. All the edit and the sound and everything was in London. So I was in London 8 months a year and in Baltimore 4 months
shooting
a year.
With the actors,
with the actors. But I tried to come backwards and forwards during that.
Did you say Baltimore?
Baltimore, yeah.
How come?
Well, it's near Washington. It's in Maryland, and they gave a sort of tax rebate to HBO, so that was good. They have an infrastructure there because they've shot The Wire and Homicide, and John Waters movies, and you know, it's within range of New York for casting. It's also close to DC, so we can go into DC to shoot as well. There's a large warehouse that we used in Columbia, just outside Baltimore, where the set stood and just stood all year. It was actually cheaper to just rent the place all year than to unpack, dismantle it and store it and then build it again. So there was all that, and then. You know, and its East Coast was nearer to travel to than the West Coast. So for all those reasons, but after 4 years of that, I thought I can't. I don't want to do it anymore. But they've said, okay, the next one you can do in London, and I said, oh well, that's easy because the next thing I want to do is set in space. And I don't have to go to Baltimore to film space. I go to studio. So, and yes, it's set in the world of space tourism in about 30 or 40 years' time. But
that's what you can.
That's
say.
about all I can say at the moment. We're still.
And will it be called Avenue 5?
Avenue 5 is the title. Yes, and it's basically about people who have nothing in common other than they're in space and just trying to kind of work out how to get on with each other. Really
interesting. And when's that going to happen?
Shooting the pilot at the end of the year.
Okay, and you're doing something before that?
I'm doing a film, another film, David Copperfield, not the magician, the Dickens.
I would love you to do a biopic about him.
Of him.
That would be awesome, but no, it's the Charles Dickens.
The budget for the special effects on a magician, David Copperfield, would be huge. But yes, and again, I seem to be getting away from the present day. I don't know why. I'm running away from the present as fast as possible, I think. Either
backwards.
Into the past or into the future. Yes. So that's in the summer, and then Avenue 5.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I know you're actually really eager to take some audience questions.
Yeah,
so we have 5 minutes left. Should we see if someone... So they're in the front, and I will repeat your question so that we get it on film in the mic.
So I'm from Finland.
Hello. Okay, where did we come up from with the Finnish Prime Minister? Well, I mean, you know, there is a Finnish Prime Minister. It wasn't a new idea, but we did like the idea of doing an episode of Veep. I think we originally planned to actually shoot it in Finland, and then we ran out of money, so we had to shoot it in Baltimore. So my apologies, but we did pick up a team in Finland who shot around Helsinki and shot a motorcade for us and the exteriors and so on, but we couldn't bring any of our actors there. And Sally Phillips, who's a great sort of British comic actress, I knew could do a really good natural performance as the Finnish Prime Minister. And Sally and Julia really hit it off, and so we keep bringing.
So did you try to cast a Finnish person, or
I think we did, but I always had Sally in mind,
Yeah.
and I always thought it would be good to see her in it. And so Mina Häkkinen keeps coming back. I think she became head of the IMF at one point, and is now on the United Nations, and in charge of probably.
It's a good career.
She'll probably come out as the head of the World Health Organization or whatever. All these people, they just rotate around different bodies. They never go away.
It's like in this room. Oh, now you're at
I
that
know.
production company.
They
Oh,
never
no,
go
you're-
away. That's the thing I noticed in Washington. Even though they worked for George Bush Senior or something, they're still in Washington, still
Lurking around.
working, because there's a whole industry there. They can be paid to advise a senator or be paid to advise a think tank, and and they come up with policies. And in Washington, policies are called product. That shows you what kind of an industry it is. It's like, I met a guy, he came up with some great product on Iraq yesterday. Fantastic product. As if you can buy it in ounces and, I don't know, in litres.
So let's have one more question if there's someone.
Have I silenced you all? Oh, there we go. Oh, yes.
Please a lot, please.
I was thinking about your writer's room.
Right.
For example, Malcolm's monologues,
Yeah.
multiple monologues, and you said you have 12 persons in the writer's room
Yes.
together. Can anyone write monologues like that?
Okay, can anyone in the writer's room write monologues
Like Malcolm.
like Malcolm Tucker's?
You studied literature and English in Oxford.
Yes.
What does this mean for your ability to write?
Okay.
Okay, so it's two-part question actually. Can anyone write monologue in the writers' room, for example, for Malcolm? And you studied literature in Oxford and English. So how does that affect your work?
How does that affect? I don't know about the studying literature. I stayed on to try and write a thesis about Paradise Lost. And after 3 years of it, the only thing I can remember is that the opening lines of Paradise Lost, of man's first disobedience and the fruit of that forbidden tree, have the same rhythm scheme to the theme tune to the Flintstones, which is of man's first disobedience and the fruit of that forbidden tree. And and it was at that point I thought, I'm not taking this seriously. But I suppose it does, sharpen your analysis of language, I suppose. And what I seem to have done since is look at political language and look at how politicians use and abuse language. So I think that's maybe where that has helped. In terms of actually writing Malcolm's, I mean, we say there's a writer's room, and it gives you this idea that there is a big room in which all the writers sit. And I think that is slightly more an American model. With us, we do it in ones and twos, and we meet for ideas meetings, but we then all go our separate ways, and we email and whatever. But yes, I work with writers, any one of whom I'd be happy to give a Malcolm monologue to. The monologues, in the end, tend to be a kind of construct of about 3 or 4 different people. There was one monologue that he did where he's sort of having a bit of a breakdown, and it's quite a long monologue, and it's very disjointed and crazy. And everyone around him is like thinking, I don't know what he's going to say next. And the way I did that was I got everyone to write a monologue, and then I did a kind of William Burroughs type, kind of just taking phrases from 12 monologues and putting them in a slightly random order, and gave it to Peter, who looked at it and just went, okay, there's nothing here to help me memory-wise. Because I wanted that. And occasionally also I do that with some of the other actors. If I want them to feel, their character to feel put on the spot, I might give a line to another member of the cast to ask the character, so that they actually have to respond to something that they haven't rehearsed. I'm thinking also of, like in The Death of Stalin, Svetlana, Stalin's daughter, is very, there are 101 thoughts buzzing in her head. So what I did was I gave Andrea a list of lots of different things to say. So it wasn't really a script, it was just a list of lines. I just asked her to say them in any, whenever any of them came to her head. And it was the job of the rest of the cast to try and answer them, because in the scene they are trying to connect with Stalin's daughter, but not quite knowing how to. So sometimes I do little things like that just to kind of nudge it in the right direction, but not always, but sometimes like that.
Okay. Your
Is that me?
driver is here.
Oh, I'm so
your
sorry. I
flight
didn't
is
realise
waiting.
it. What are we doing for time? What's the
Oh,
time?
it's 0:00.
Oh, right,
0:00.
okay. Oh, heavens.
Unfortunately, we have to let you go. Thank you so
Okay,
much
thank you
for
very
coming
much.
and
Thank you. I'm
sharing,
sorry it's so
Armando.
brief. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.